Dad, your face, it doesn't fit our $600,000 wedding.
A nursing home.
That's right. We'll add hard holds, no online moves, no phone moves, in-person ID only.
Revocable trust. You as sole trustee. Update will.
As long as he doesn't do anything crazy, that $2.5 million is as good as ours.
Sunday, he signs the trust. Then it's smooth.
You still don't know what I signed.
I wish you peace.
Don't complicate it. Birthday. Perfection.
What is this? You cut me out on my wedding day?
My son told me I was too old and too ugly to sit at his $600,000 wedding. He even said a nursing home would be better for me. I felt crushed, betrayed in a way I never imagined. But he didn't know the truth. I still held the keys to $2.5 million. And one letter in my pocket would change his world forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room of the house I had lived in for 35 years. The same walls that once echoed with laughter now held nothing but silence. On the mantel was the wedding photo of Margaret and me, frozen in time, her smile still bright even though she had been gone for decades. My hand rested on the arm of the old chair I had repaired countless times, and my mind replayed the phone call from Michael like a broken record. His words cut deep that I was too old, too ugly to sit at his wedding, the one that was costing $600,000. He said a nursing home would be a better place for me. After everything I had done, after every sacrifice, this was how he repaid me. I thought back to the day I signed the check for $80,000 to cover his college tuition. It wasn't easy, not when I worked double shifts, coming home so tired I sometimes slept at the kitchen table. Then there was the Ford Explorer I bought him, $28,000, so he wouldn't have to take the bus in the rain or the snow. He drove off with his friends, and I stayed home, exhausted, telling myself that was what a father did. Later, when he and Rebecca wanted their first apartment, I emptied a savings account and handed over $50,000 for the down payment. I remember Margaret's voice in my head telling me to make sure our son had every chance we never had. I thought I was building a future for him. I never thought that same son would one day see me as an obstacle, someone to be hidden away. I looked around the room, every corner heavy with memory. The oak table in the dining area was one I built myself, sanding it late at night when Michael was still a boy. The grandfather clock against the wall had belonged to my father, its slow ticking always steady, reminding me of time passing. And the house itself, now worth $650,000, stood as the last piece of stability I had. This house wasn't just wood and nails, it was birthdays and Christmas mornings, arguments and apologies, family dinners where Margaret's cooking filled the air. Now I knew it had become the very thing they were circling, like vultures waiting for me to fall. My son no longer saw a father. He saw a dollar sign. The first wave of pain nearly broke me. I felt small, useless, betrayed in a way I never thought possible. But then, slowly, something shifted inside. I realized that if I didn't act, if I sat back quietly like they wanted me to, they would strip me of everything. Not just this house, not just the savings, but the dignity I had left. The words formed in my mind, sharp and clear. If I don't act now, they will take it all. I stood, shaky but determined, and walked to the old cabinet where I kept important things. The life insurance policy is still valid. The deed to the properties I had invested in quietly, piece by piece over the years. The key to the safe where documents sat untouched. I spread them out on the table like weapons because in that moment they were. The light from the setting sun poured through the window, casting long shadows across the floorboards I had laid with my own hands. I traced the lines with my eyes, remembering how Margaret and I knelt side by side, fitting the planks, talking about the future. Now I whispered to her as if she were still in the room. "Margaret, do you see? The boy we gave everything for? He wants to push me aside. He thinks I don't matter anymore." My throat tightened, but the whisper gave me strength. Speaking her name out loud reminded me I wasn't truly alone. She would want me to stand tall. She would want me to fight back. I looked again at the papers, at the evidence of a life's worth of effort. I stacked them carefully, each one a reminder that I still had control. My pulse quickened as I picked up the phone and dialed the only person I trusted in matters like these. "James," I said when my lawyer answered, my voice steady though my hands trembled. "We need to talk, tonight." Saying those words felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. For the first time since Michael's cruel call, I felt power returning to me. The television in the corner was still the same boxy set from the 90s. The bookshelf held albums filled with yellowing photographs. On the couch lay the knitted blanket Margaret made during the winter Michael went off to college, each stitch tied with care. The room was warm in its familiarity, yet suffocating in the weight of betrayal. Every object seemed to remind me of what was at stake. The home wasn't just an address. It was proof of my years, my labor, my sacrifices, and now, to my own son, it was a prize to be claimed, even if that meant locking me away. As I sat there, the anger no longer felt like something that crushed me. It felt like something that fueled me. They underestimated me, thought I was weak, thought age had dulled my mind. But I still had the strength to protect what was mine. I still had the will to show them that betrayal has a price. And as the last light of the day faded, I knew with certainty that Chapter 1 of their scheme had ended. My Chapter 2 had just begun. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment one below to let me know you're here with me. I woke before sunrise, the house still and blue, the way it gets when the world is holding its breath. The coffee pot hissed, the old clock ticked, and I set the stack of documents on the oak table I built with my own hands. Deeds, policy numbers, and account statements. The lines of my life, ink on paper. Chapter 2 ended last night when I called James Franklin. This morning, I will start moving. I would not wait one more day for my son to decide where I belonged. I decided that for myself a long time ago, even if I forgot it for a while. I put on the navy jacket Margaret always liked, the one that still carried a faint trace of cedar and winter, and I locked the front door behind me. At the bank, the branch lights were still warming up. A young teller recognized me and waved. I asked to see the manager. Her name was Carla, a steady woman with kind eyes who had watched me bring in deposits for years. I set my folder on her desk and spoke plainly. I told her I wanted a full review of my savings account, the one with $300,000, and to place a hold on any transfers or withdrawals that did not have my wet signature in person. No online requests, no phone authorizations, no third-party privileges, no courtesy exceptions. I asked for alerts on every inquiry, every form filed with my name on it. I requested new cards and a new PIN, and I asked if there had been any recent attempts to add authorized users. She frowned, tapping at her keyboard, then looked up carefully. There had been a call last week from a family representative asking about trust options for elderly clients. No names were given. Routine, she said. But she made notes, put flags on my accounts, and printed a receipt for every action she took. When she asked if everything was all right, I answered the way men of my age answer when the whole world is falling apart. I told her I was just getting my affairs in order. She nodded in that quiet way people nod when they hear more than you say. From there, I drove to the safe deposit vault across town. The attendant checked my license and slid the small metal box across the table. Inside were two things that still smelled like the past: the insurance policy Margaret insisted I keep, and the handwritten list of the properties I had acquired over the years. I traced the names with my finger. The duplex on Cedar, bought from a man with hands that shook when he passed me the keys. The 4-unit on Lincoln, purchased when folks said that neighborhood would never turn. The small brick storefront on Maple where a tax office, a nail salon, and a sandwich shop sent rent checks that always cleared. There was the brokerage statement, too, the one that had sat in the drawer like a quiet secret, rising bit by bit through 2 market crashes and a pandemic, now worth about $1.2 million. Not a windfall, a life's work. I slipped those papers into a thicker envelope and wrote my own full name across the front. I put the envelope back in the box, then closed my eyes and breathed until the tightness in my chest began to loosen. By the time I reached James Franklin's office, the morning sun had turned gold. His receptionist offered coffee, and I took it, even though I did not need more coffee. James came out from his glass-walled conference room with his leather folio tucked under one arm. We shook hands the way men do who understand that courtesies matter, even when the heart is bleeding. He led me into his office, lined with books and framed certificates. I set the folder on his desk like a man placing a burden on an altar. I spoke simply. I told him about Michael, about the call, about the wedding that cost $600,000, and the words nursing home delivered like a sentence. I told him what I feared they were planning next. He listened without interrupting, pen still, eyes steady. When I finished, he asked me what outcome I wanted. It was the right question. I said I wanted control. My control. I said I wanted to protect the house, now valued at $650,000, and the other properties. I wanted to make sure no one could move a dime without my knowledge. And if something happened to me, I wanted my estate to go to people who needed it and respected it, not to those who measured their love by the size of the photos at a fancy wedding. James outlined a plan. We could create a revocable living trust with me as the sole trustee, consolidate titles, and record documents that made it difficult for anyone to interfere. We could update my will, draft letters of intent, and prepare a video statement to head off any claim that I was confused or coerced. We would install a lockbox around my decisions, not to hide them from the world, but to make sure they could not be stolen in the dark. He spoke about powers of attorney and medical directives, careful structures built to guard a person's dignity. I nodded slowly, feeling the fog lift, feeling my feet touch the ground again. The words were dry, but the meaning was not. It meant I did not have to go quietly. It meant I could make choices. We took inventory. He asked me to list the assets one by one, and I did, the way a man reads out names at a memorial. The Cedar duplex, the Lincoln 4-unit, the Maple storefront, the house I had lived in for 35 years, with the oak table and the grandfather clock, the house where Margaret's voice still lived in the corners. The savings account has $300,000. The brokerage accounts totaled $1.2 million, a checking account that covered monthly bills. The policy Margaret had argued for at the kitchen table while I pretended not to need it. He wrote the numbers on a yellow pad in neat columns, then drew lines connecting them to people and papers. When he finished, the page looked like the blueprint of a building that had been standing all along. He asked me to authorize bank notices and to grant his office limited ability to receive copies of any attempted changes. I agreed. He called the title company to confirm that the deed on my house was clear. It was. He called the county clerk to confirm no liens had been placed. None had. He ordered preliminary reports on the properties and set a time with a notary. When he hung up, there was a knock on the door. The receptionist stepped in with a padded envelope and said a courier had just dropped it off for me. No return address. My name was written in a hurried hand. I opened it with a steadying breath. Inside lay a typed letter on heavy paper and a glossy brochure. The letter was polite, the way a knife is polished. It was from Michael and Rebecca. They had enclosed a family trust proposal and a draft of a care plan that, in their words, would relieve me of the burdens of decision-making. The words swam. They suggested I sign as a donor, naming Michael as trustee, to ensure a seamless management of assets for the benefit of all. There was a section for my home, for my savings, for my rental properties, and for my investment accounts. Beneath it, a pre-filled line for signatures and a sticky tab that said, "Sign here." At the end, a gracious paragraph. They understood how hard aging could be. This would make everything easier. Included was a brochure for a senior community with staged photos of smiling gray-haired people playing cards and eating vanilla cake. Someone had circled a line that read, Memory Care Wing now open. I felt my jaw tighten until it ached. My breath slowed so I would not raise my voice to an empty room. I heard my own whisper before I knew I had spoken. They do not just want to put me away. They want to take everything I built. The words tasted like metal. I set the letter on James's desk and pushed it forward with one finger. He scanned it, the corners of his mouth flattening. He said he had seen versions of this before. It always came wrapped in concern, scented with lavender. He asked me what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it clear. I wanted to build a wall they could not climb, and I wanted to leave a record they could not rewrite after I was gone. We spent the next hour drafting a new will that revoked any previous bequests to Michael, a letter to be delivered with the will, plain and direct, written in my own hand, explaining the reasons, a trust that named me as sole trustee and, upon my death, directed disbursement to a scholarship fund for young people who needed a hand, not a handout, and to a women's shelter Margaret had admired. A directive that specified no one, not even my son, could place me in any facility without my written consent or a clear medical finding, one that would not be easy to fake. A bank instruction requires in-person verification for any large movement of funds. We kept copies of everything and placed originals in a separate folder. When the notary arrived, I signed line after line, feeling my hand steady with each stroke. I did not rush. I wrote my name the way my father taught me, legible and responsible. At noon, James asked if I wanted to record a statement. I did. He set up a small camera, adjusted the light the way a careful man adjusts a picture frame. I sat in front of a bookcase and looked into the lens until I could pretend it was just a person across the table. I spoke my name. I stated my age. I stated the date and time and the place. I described my assets and my decisions. I said that I was making these choices freely, with a clear mind. I said that love does not entitle you to someone else's life. I said I understood my son would be angry. I said that anger was not a reason to surrender. When we finished, James checked the audio and nodded. He burned a copy to a small drive and sealed it in an envelope with my initials across the flap. Driving home along the same streets I had driven for decades, I noticed everything. The cracked curb where Michael once fell from his bike, the shuttered gas station that became a coffee shop, the sycamore that leans toward our roof like an old friend. At a red light, my phone buzzed. It was Michael. I let it ring twice before I answered. I kept my voice even. He asked if I had given any more thought to the wedding arrangements. He said Rebecca's family wanted everything to be smooth. He repeated the word smooth, as if my face and my age were rough places in need of sanding. I told him I was thinking. I told him I wanted his day to be peaceful. He seemed pleased by that. He said everything was on track. He said Rebecca's father had paid deposits and was happy the guest list was tight. He said we could talk about the trust on Sunday after I had time to rest. He laughed lightly. He said this would take the weight off my shoulders. I said nothing for a beat. Then I told him I appreciated his concern. I said I had appointments to keep. We hung up, and I sat in the car with the engine idling, looking at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. If you only knew what I signed today. Back at the house, I put the kettle on, more for the sound than the tea. I laid the signed papers on the oak table, aligning the corners, sliding the envelopes until they were square and neat. I wrote a short note to James with a list of small follow-ups. Confirm the title filings, verify the bank flags, and schedule a meeting next week to review loose ends. I placed one sealed envelope in the safe deposit key pouch and set another in the drawer where I kept my cufflinks. Then I took a separate sheet of stationery, good paper I rarely used, and began to write to Michael in my own slow, careful hand. I told him the story of the table, the nights I sanded while he slept. I told him about the first property, the handshake deal that saved a man from bankruptcy and gave me a chance to build something steady. I told him about the policy Margaret had pushed for, the way she'd leaned forward at the kitchen table and said, "We have to think about the future." I did not scold. I did not accuse. The letter was only for me for the moment. I might need to remember that I tried to be the man my wife believed in. In the afternoon, I drove to the duplex on Cedar to check the gutters. It was an excuse to be near work, I understood. The tenants waved from the porch. We spoke about leaky faucets and a busted screen. I replaced the screen myself, the way I always do. The quiet tasks centered me. At the Lincoln 4 unit, the stairwell smelled like laundry detergent and Sunday dinners. A boy rode his scooter down the sidewalk and shouted hello. At the Maple storefront, the tax place was already busy, and the sandwich shop owner came out with a paper bag. He pressed it into my hands, said it was on the house. I sat on the low wall out front and ate slowly, the way an old man eats when he is trying to taste his life. Work, people, rent on time, the rhythm that had kept me upright for years. On my way home, I stopped at a stationery store and bought a small pack of cream envelopes. I stood by the counter longer than necessary, running my thumb along the edge of the paper, feeling the weight of it. I went home, wrote Michael in block letters on one of them, and tucked it into the drawer with the cufflinks. I did not write what would go inside. I already knew. I could see it clearly. The pages we signed today. The card with James's number. A note that would say, "Call him on Monday." The truth would not need drama. It would only need to be delivered. As the evening settled, the house changed color. The light turned amber and then dim. The clock chimed softly, and I could almost hear Margaret's voice in the chime. I stood at the window and looked out at the yard where we planted tomatoes and roses, where we took pictures on birthdays, where we argued and forgave and grew older. I spoke to her again, quietly. I told her I had done something hard. I told her I finally put a fence around what we built. I told her I did it because I loved our son, and because love that goes unreturned cannot be the place where I put my last breath. I told her I still hoped he might someday remember who he is. But hope would not be my plan. The plan was already on paper, stamped, notarized, and signed. My phone buzzed again. A text from Michael. A photo of the venue with white chairs set in precise rows. He wrote, "It will be beautiful. Everything is under control." I studied the words, the simplicity of them, the confidence. Under control. Whose control? I typed back a simple message. I wrote, "I want your day to be peaceful." He sent a thumbs up. I put the phone face down on the table and laughed, a small, rough sound that surprised me. They think I am weak. The game has just begun. Before bed, I opened the safe at the back of the hall closet and placed the newest documents inside. I locked the metal door and then tested the knob on the front door twice, the way I always do. In the kitchen, I washed the coffee cup and set it on the rack to dry. I folded the knitted blanket on the couch and smoothed its edges. These small rituals were my anchor, the ordinary acts that held a life together when bigger things tried to tear it apart. In my room, I took out the box where I kept old notes from Margaret. On top was a faded index card with her handwriting. It said, "Do the next right thing." It was stained with something, maybe tea, maybe grief. I slid the card back into the box. Sleep came and left in waves. I dreamt of walking through the house with a set of keys, locking doors, and opening others. When I woke again, it was still dark. I listened to the silence and felt something I had not felt since Michael called. Calm, not because anything was easy, because I had done what I could do. I had worked the way I always work, with my hands, my back, my name. That was enough for tonight. Morning brought a clarity that felt like cold air in the lungs. I called James after breakfast. He confirmed the filings had gone through. He confirmed the bank had flagged my accounts. He confirmed the notary seals were clean. He told me he would courier certified copies to my house and to the safe deposit box. He asked if I wanted him to send a light notice to Michael, something that said my affairs were updated and that any requests should be routed through him. I told him not yet. I said I wanted quiet. He understood. He said, "Sometimes quiet is the strongest message." An hour later, a delivery truck pulled to the curb. The driver handed me a plain envelope that felt heavier than it looked. Inside were the documents, each stamped, each initialed. I set them on the table and stood over them the way a builder stands over a foundation. There was a moment when I wanted to cry and could not. Instead, I ran my palm over the paper once, and then I put them away. I shaved, put on a clean shirt, and dialed Michael. I kept my voice soft. I told him I had been thinking about his idea. I told him maybe a place with people my age would not be so bad. I let the word maybe hang. He brightened immediately. He said he knew I would see it that way. He said Rebecca's parents had contacts at a place called Sunset Manor. He said there was an opening. He said we needed to move quickly. He said we could bring some of my things to decorate the room. He said it would be better for everyone. I said I would think about it. He took that as a yes. He told me not to worry. He said he had everything under control. I ended the call with a single sentence. I said, "I am proud that you are building a life." He paused, surprised, then thanked me. When we hung up, I stared at the phone until the screen went black. If you knew what I signed, you would not be so calm. That afternoon, I walked through the house room by room and made small lists. What to keep, what to give away, what to put in storage. I was not leaving, I was preparing. Preparation is a kind of prayer. In the bedroom, I opened the bottom drawer and found Margaret's scarf, the soft blue one she wore to keep out the wind. I held it to my face for a long time. In the hallway, I paused by the picture of Michael in a cap and gown, the day I paid the last payment on the $80,000 of tuition that put him on that stage. I touched the glass with 2 fingers and then let it go. Near dusk, I stepped onto the porch and watched the neighborhood quiet down. A man watered his lawn and waved. A woman jogged past with a dog that looked like a cloud. Somewhere a radio played an old song that rang through summers I thought would never end. I spoke again, softly, to the woman who has been gone a long time and who will always be here. Margaret, I am doing the next right thing. I am not waiting for them to write my ending. I am writing it myself. When I went back inside, I took the cream envelope with Michael's name on it and slid it into the pocket of my jacket. I tested the weight of it just to feel how the future can fit into something so small. I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at everything one more time. The oak table, the grandfather clock, the couch with the knitted blanket, the light deepening on the floorboards I laid with my own hands. I felt the old grief like an ache that no longer controls me. I felt the new steadiness like a beam set in concrete. They think I am old and tired and easy to move. They think kindness is weakness. They think saying the word family makes any act holy. They are wrong. I am still here. I am still the man who built this house and this life. And I am no longer standing still. I locked the front door for the night and whispered to the empty room the sentence that would carry me into what comes next. They do not know what I hold in my hands. They do not know that one envelope can change everything. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment too below to let me know you're here with me. I arrived at James Franklin's office before the hour, the way you do when something important is about to change, and you don't want to give fate any chance to stall. The hall smelled faintly of furniture polish and old paper. His receptionist offered coffee and a pen to sign the log. I took both, even though my hand already knew its own name. The conference room door was open. Sunlight fell across the long table and the stack of documents that would carry my decisions into the future. James greeted me with that measured kindness he has, not too soft, not too sharp, and asked if I was ready. I told him yes. My voice surprised me. It did not shake. He placed the revised will on the table. The title at the top was plain, Last Will of Richard Patterson. He turned the pages with care, explaining each section in simple words, the way a good man explains a machine before you turn it on. The will revoked earlier versions. It has no family beneficiary. It directed my estate, $2.5 million when you count the house, the rentals, the savings, the investments, to a scholarship fund, and to a women's shelter Margaret admired. It defined those gifts in numbers, not wishes. It named an executor who would not bend. It required a video statement, which we had already recorded, to travel with it like a seal. At the end, there was a blank line. My line. I read every paragraph, slowly, out loud in my head. Words are heavy when they carry years. Then I picked up the pen. I signed my name the way my father taught me. I signed it again on the second copy and initialed each page. The notary watched, her stamp clicking like a small hammer. She asked me to state that I was of sound mind. I answered simply, I am. She smiled. The stamp came down again, ink and pressure. Decisions were pressed into paper. James slid a fresh envelope toward me. Inside were certified copies of the will and the trust documents we prepared. He also included a letter addressed to me on his letterhead, confirming the changes in clear language. He said it was good practice to have a plain summary in case anyone tried to confuse the story later. He bound another set into a heavier folder for his vault. He told me the county filings for the trust would be recorded this afternoon and that the bank flags we set yesterday were already active. He said the word active the way you say a door is locked and you have the key in your pocket. I put one copy of the will into my jacket. I put another copy into a thicker envelope with my name on it. That one felt heavier than paper has a right to feel. Then I leaned back and let myself breathe. I had walked here under a weight I could not see. I was walking out a different man. We stayed another half hour to draft a short statement for anyone who might ask me to sign away control. It was a letter I could hand to a banker, a hospital, a facility, or a relative. It said in the simplest words that no one had authority over me without a court order grounded in real evidence. It said requests for power of attorney or trust transfers would be refused. It said I kept my own keys. The notary stamped that too. I put that letter beside the will. When we finished, James asked if I wanted to send a notice to Michael. He could mail a polite letter that said my legal affairs were updated and that any questions should go through him. I considered it. Then I shook my head. Not yet. I told him I preferred quiet. He nodded and said, sometimes quiet is the loudest sound a person can make. He walked me to the door, shook my hand again, and said to call him if anything changed. I said it already had. Outside, the morning had ripened into noon. The cafe across the street had patio tables and a striped awning that threw shade over the sidewalk. I went in because my hands needed the warmth of a cup and my mind needed a place to rest before I drove home. I ordered black coffee and sat near the window facing James's office, the envelope with my new life tucked inside my jacket. The bell over the door jingled every few minutes. People came and went. Voices rose and fell. Then the bell rang again, and I heard my son's laugh. I did not look up right away. I knew the sound, the tone that says everything is easy for a person who has not yet met the bill for what he believes. I lifted my eyes. Michael stood 2 tables over with Rebecca. They were both dressed like they had stepped out of a catalog, which I suppose they had. He leaned over with that casual bend of a man who believes the world will step aside. She adjusted her sunglasses on top of her head and smiled at him the way a person smiles at a prize they think they've already won. They did not see me. I sat with my shoulders squared and my face quiet, just another older man with a coffee. Their voices carried without effort. Rebecca said, "As long as he doesn't do anything crazy, that $2.5 million is as good as ours." The words were soft, like she was discussing a dress on sale. Michael chuckled. "He won't. He never does. He doesn't have the guts." He took a sip and shrugged. "Sunday, we'll have him sign the trust. Then it's smooth sailing." He used that word again. Smooth. The way he said it made my skin feel tight. I watched the steam rise from my cup. I held the saucer with both hands so I would not break the porcelain with my grip. Something in me flared, then settled into a clearer fire. Not the shaking rage from the first night. Not the broken grief. A clean heat. I thought, you do not know me. You do not know what I signed this morning. You do not know what one envelope can do. Rebecca touched his arm. Your father should be grateful. We're simplifying his life. Michael nodded. I'm doing him a favor. His phone buzzed and he glanced at it, smiling. Rehearsal updates. Everything is perfect. He said perfect the way people say a word when they need it to be true. He lifted the cup and took another slow drink. I looked at his hands. They were my hands at 20. Strong, careless, sure. I remembered those hands gripping the edge of a wagon when I pulled him through leaves in the fall. I remembered those hands grabbing the keys to the Ford Explorer I bought with money I did not have. I remembered those hands holding the diploma I paid for in installments. Those hands now tapped the table in a rhythm that sounded like entitlement. I set $2 beneath my cup and stood up carefully. I walked past them like a man on an ordinary errand. They did not look my way. Outside, the day felt different. The sky was the same. I was not. I slipped my palm into the inside pocket of my jacket and touched the envelope. Sharp corners, crisp paper, a weight with teeth. I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. Something more like acceptance. The day of their wedding would not be their story the way they thought. It would be the day the story changed. Back home, the house felt like a friend who had been waiting for me to return from a long trip. I laid the new documents on the oak table and squared the stack with the heel of my hand. I read the will once more. I read the trust once more. I read the short letter to anyone who asked me to surrender. Then I moved through the rooms the way a man checks the fence before a storm. I pulled the safe deposit key from its hook and put it in my pocket. I called the courier service James uses and booked a pickup for late afternoon. When the driver arrived, I handed him an envelope for the bank vault and another for James's office, both sealed, both with my initials over the flap. He scanned the barcodes and promised delivery by 3. I watched him drive away and felt a tension in my shoulders let go an inch. An hour later, my phone rang. Michael's name lit the screen. I let it go once, twice, then answered. He sounded bright. He talked about schedules, about the seating chart, about how Rebecca's father wanted to keep things elegant. He used the word elegant like a shield. He slid almost casually into the subject of the trust. He said, I left something for you at the house. Did you get it? I said yes. He said, Great, you can sign it on Sunday. We'll handle the rest. I kept my voice level. I'm still reviewing. He paused, then softened his tone as if I were a child. Dad, it's straightforward. You'll be relieved once it's done. He laughed. It's under control. I said, Whose control? He did not answer that. He changed the subject to ties, shoes, and photos. I said I wanted his day to be peaceful. He took those words as surrender. I let him have the misunderstanding. I would trade 15 seconds of his satisfaction for the quiet I needed. In the evening, a call came from a number I did not recognize. It was a bank supervisor on the main line downtown. He wanted to confirm a request on my account. Someone had called asking about adding an authorized user for family assistance. The request was declined based on the flags Carla had placed. He wanted to make sure that was correct. I told him it was. He said he admired the clarity of my instructions. He said I should consider adding a short voice password that had to be spoken at the start of any call for service. He offered to set it up. I chose an old word Margaret loved. He typed it in. He repeated it back to me. I felt a small surge of satisfaction, one more gate secured. The next morning, James called to say the county recorder had filed the trust. He had copies. He would send them over. He asked if I wanted a quiet record placed with my primary care doctor that all medical decisions would run through me or the specific proxy I named, not my son. I said yes. He faxed the directive while I was on the line. He said a nurse confirmed receipt. I thanked him. He asked how I was holding up. I told him I was sleeping again, at least a little, which was honest. He said that was good. He said to eat well. It sounded like something Margaret would say. It warmed me. Late morning, the first crack appeared in Michael's confidence. He called with a tightness under the words. He said he tried to arrange a walkthrough at a senior residence for after the wedding, and they asked for documentation. He said it would be simple once I signed on Sunday. He repeated Sunday as if the day owed him something. I said I was still reviewing. He told me Rebecca's parents had gone to a lot of trouble. I told him I was grateful for their trouble. I did not promise anything else. I could hear the edge creeping into his voice, the faint scrape of a plan that did not move as smoothly as he expected. He swallowed it, then tightened his tone again. He said everything was fine. He said these were small bumps. He said it will all be ours soon. He caught himself and corrected. All set, I mean. He laughed, forced air. I said I would see him at the rehearsal dinner. He said he would have someone save me a seat. He did not specify where. In the afternoon, I drove to the courthouse annex to pick up certified copies of the trust filings, the ones James had couriered. The building smelled like paper and old carpet. The clerk slid the stamped documents under the glass. The seal gleamed like something hammered flat. I thanked her and tucked the papers into a plain brown envelope. As I turned to leave, I saw Rebecca's father at the far end of the hall. He was speaking to a man in a suit with an eager face. Their heads bent close. I did not approach. I did not hide. I walked past them and met the open air outside, where the light is honest. On the way home, I stopped again at the cafe. This time, I sat at a table by the back wall, where the clatter of cups and the ordinary conversation of strangers softened my thoughts. It is a steadying thing to sit among people who do not know your story and do not need to. I took the envelope from my jacket and laid it flat on the table. I slid one certified copy of the will inside and the short letter to anyone who asked me to surrender. I added James's card, paper clipped to the top. I wrote Michael's name on the front in block letters. I pressed my palm against it until the heat of my hand went into the paper. Then I slipped it back into my pocket. The plan was no longer an idea. It was an object. As I rose to leave, my phone lit with a new message. It was from Rebecca, short and sweet. Hope you're getting some rest. Big weekend. We'll take great care of you. I stood there for a moment, the way a man stands in a field when a thunderhead rolls in. I typed a reply and then deleted it. I did not owe them any more words. The day before the wedding, I ironed my shirt, polished my shoes, and set everything in neat lines on the bed. I placed the cream envelope on top of the jacket where I would not forget it. The house made small familiar sounds as if to say it approved. I ate a simple dinner, washed the plate, dried it, and placed it in the rack. I walked the rooms one more time, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. A life leaves signs you can hold in your hands, and I wanted to say thank you to them. That night, I slept through. I woke before the alarm and watched the pale slice of morning climb the wall. I spoke to Margaret because I always do when I need courage. I told her I would be kind and firm. I told her I would not shout. I told her I would not let them paint me as a bitter old man. I told her I would do the next right thing. Then I dressed, slid the envelope into my inside pocket, and locked the door. At the church, the stone steps were wide and clean. White flowers lined the aisle inside. A string quartet tuned in the corner. Ushers in matching suits guided guests to their places. On the groom's side, the first row sat empty with a card that read, "Reserved." I did not sit there. I found a seat near the back where the sight lines are clear and the exits are easy. I folded my hands and breathed. The building smelled like wood and polish and something sweet. Weddings always smell like sugar, no matter what you cook. Faces turned. The pianist began a soft prelude. Michael and his groomsmen slipped in through the side door, laughing, cuffing each other's shoulders, performing a version of manhood for the cameras. He did not see me at first. Then he did. Our eyes met for a single second. His mouth changed shape, then smoothed, as if he had adjusted a photo with his mind. He nodded once, the way you nod to an employee who showed up. I nodded back. I let the nod pass through me and fall away. I was not here to collect gestures. The ceremony started on time. Rebecca walked the aisle with a practiced grace, the dress of fortune in white fabric. People sighed the way they do when they see a promise and forget all the fine print. Vows were spoken, rings were placed. The minister said words about love and family, about honor and duty. I listened, sitting very still, with the cream envelope warm against my chest. I thought about honor and duty and how they are nouns that become verbs only when you keep them in your hands. After the kiss and the applause, a receiving line formed in the foyer. People pressed forward with smiles and phones. I waited. I am good at waiting. I learned patience on job sites, in hospitals, and in offices where clerks look for what you need behind a door you cannot open. When the line thinned, I stepped forward. Michael's smile trembled for a heartbeat, then held. Rebecca's smile did not change. I took her hands and told her she looked beautiful. I told him I wished them peace. Then I leaned in to hug my son, my hand firm on his shoulder. In that moment, I slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. Paper against silk. It slid into place without effort. He patted my back and pulled away. He did not notice the weight change. I walked out into the daylight. The bells began to ring. Cars inched forward. The photographer shouted cheerful commands. I stood at the edge of the steps and watched the sky. A small wind lifted, the kind that moves the edges of a life and lets you see what is underneath. My phone buzzed. A new voicemail from an unknown number. I did not check it yet. I wanted to keep these minutes for myself. When I reached home, I took off the jacket and set it on the chair. I sat at the table, poured water, and drank it slowly. The house was quiet. The clock ticked. The sun moved across the floorboards. Then the phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was low and tight. He asked me to pick up. I did. He began with the smallest possible word. Dad? Then silence, a heavy silence that carried other people in the room and the weight of the envelope. He said, "What is this?" He did not say it angrily. Not yet. He said it the way a man says, "I have stepped through a door and the room is not what I expected." I told him to call the number on the card. He said he already had. James had answered. James had confirmed. James had said the words that make the ground tilt. Michael's breath hitched. He said, "You cut me out." I said, "I wrote the truth." He said, louder now, "After everything I have done for you?" The sentence fell apart as he said it. The words had nowhere to land. He began to justify. He said I was old. He said he was protecting me. He said Rebecca's family had plans. He said I misunderstood. He said this wasn't fair. He said I blindsided him on his day. I let him talk until the words crashed into each other and ran out. Then I said a single sentence. "You thought I was weak." There was a long beat. He said nothing. I heard a door close in the distance, then a new voice, sharp as ice. "Rebecca, you won't get away with this?" I did not answer her. I spoke to my son. "I chose where my life goes. You will choose yours." He swore under his breath. He said I had humiliated him. He said people were asking questions. He said his father-in-law wanted answers. He said the word answers like a demand. I said, "You will find them in the letter, and in yourself." He hung up. 10 minutes later, he called again. This time, there was anger, not panic. He listed my supposed failures. He told me I was unreasonable. He told me no one would understand. He told me to fix it. I let him finish. Then I delivered the line I had saved for when the truth finally settled. "You thought I was weak, but now you see the consequences." My voice did not rise. It did not need to. I ended the call and stood very still in my kitchen, my hand on the back of the chair Margaret used to pull out with her foot when her hands were full. The room felt larger and emptier at the same time. I walked to the window and watched the light change. A bird landed on the fence post, looked around, and flew away. I exhaled a breath I did not know I was holding. That night, James called to confirm Michael had reached him. He said the conversation was short and heated. He said he stayed calm, explained the documents, and reminded Michael that my decisions were final. He said there might be more calls. He offered, once again, to send a general notice to the family. I told him not yet. He asked how I felt. I told him I felt like a beam had been set in concrete. He understood. As darkness settled, I sat on the couch and pulled Margaret's knitted blanket over my knees. I thought about justice, not the courtroom kind with a judge and a gavel, the kind you make in your own house by saying yes to what is right and no to what is not, even when it is your own child asking. I thought about the envelope, the way it slid into place, the way a small thing with the right weight can tip a life. I closed my eyes and whispered the sentence that carried me through this day. I am not weak. I am not cruel. I am clear. Tomorrow would bring noise, gossip, hand-wringing, explanations that try to make selfishness sound like care. But tonight, the plan had moved from ink to action. The will was signed. The trust was recorded. The bank was guarded. The letter was delivered. The story had turned. I could feel it in my bones. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever been told you were an embarrassment, you know this feeling. It is heavy and electric at the same time. It is a weight and a current. It hums in your chest until you stand up and make a choice. I made mine. And because I did, Chapter 5 will not be about begging for a place at a table. It will be about setting my own table in a room I chose. The house settled around me as if it approved. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door closed and a couple laughed. Life went on. My life had begun again. I turned off the lamp and sat in the soft dark for a while, listening to the sound that comes when a decision lands and holds. It is a quiet sound, but it fills a room. It filled mine. Feeling dismissed, feeling small, that's a hard road, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and treated with dignity, comment the keyword, justice. Now watch what they will do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. I remember the sound of the bells at the church, bright and careless, echoing over the courtyard while guests poured out with laughter and chatter. A $600,000 wedding, they said, a day for photographs and champagne. But when I looked at that first row of pews, the seat with the card that should have read, Father of the Groom, was empty. I had chosen not to sit there. Instead, I had taken a place near the back, my jacket buttoned, my hands folded, the envelope in my pocket pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. The ceremony ended, the applause faded, and the couple walked down the aisle as though nothing could touch them. I let the tide of people move past me until I found my moment. In the foyer, when Michael leaned in to hug me, I slipped the envelope into his inside pocket. He never felt it. The bells rang, the rice flew, the cameras clicked. I walked down the steps and out into the street, steady as a man leaving a courtroom after delivering the verdict himself. That night, in some hotel suite, he opened the envelope. Inside was no blessing, no check, no gift card for a honeymoon. Inside was a letter and a certified copy of my revised will, the one that cut him out completely and transferred my $2.5 million estate into a scholarship fund and a shelter program. The letter explained it in plain words, words he could not twist. I told him I loved him, but love cannot excuse betrayal. I told him he had not lost money. He had lost his father. The call came at midnight. His voice shook, low and raw. Dad, please. I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to make sure things were secure. I thought I was helping. His words tangled on each other, collapsing under their own weight. I listened. Then I said, "You didn't lose my money? You lost me." Silence. Then a sound I had not heard from him since he was a boy, sobbing, broken and small. Rebecca's voice cut in next, sharp as glass. She was angry, indignant, spitting accusations. How could you humiliate us like this? How could you destroy your own son's future? I almost laughed at the word future. Their future had been written in numbers on my back. I told her the truth plainly. You built your plans on sand. I just let the tide come in. She hung up before I finished. The next morning, the storm began. Rebecca's parents called a meeting. There was shouting behind closed doors, whispers in hotel lobbies. Guests who had danced the night before were now gossiping over breakfast. I stayed home, sitting by the window, drinking coffee from the same mug Margaret once used. I imagined the look on Michael's face when he realized his bride's family was questioning the marriage itself, questioning if he was the man they thought they had invested in. I imagined the silence between them when they understood the house, the accounts, the rentals, the trust, all gone from their reach. 2 days later, Michael came to the house. He stood at the gate, hair unkempt, suit wrinkled, eyes red. He didn't step inside. He just called to me through the bars like a boy begging to be let in after curfew. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, I can fix this. Just change it back. Just give me one more chance." I walked out onto the porch, leaned against the column Margaret had painted white the summer before she passed, and looked at him without anger, without pity. "Michael," I said, "you didn't just try to take my money. You tried to erase me, and I won't be erased." He dropped his head, his shoulders shook. Then he turned and walked away. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Some distances can't be crossed once they're measured. Over the next weeks, I set everything in order. I signed the final trust papers with James. The scholarship fund was launched in Margaret's name with the first $100,000 allocated to students from our town. I donated the house, valued at $650,000, to the shelter program. By the end of the month, the property was transferred. I moved into a modest apartment overlooking the park. 2 bedrooms, simple furniture, a balcony with a view of the trees. The rent was easy, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight slide off my chest. Neighbors were kind. A retired teacher lived across the hall and brought cookies. A young couple downstairs always offered to carry groceries. The sound of children playing in the park drifted up in the afternoons. I bought myself a comfortable chair, a small bookshelf, and a record player. I sat by the window with a glass of wine and let the music play softly while I watched the sun fade behind the trees. Peace was not loud. Peace was not crowded. Peace was finally mine. Meanwhile, Michael's world unraveled. Friends stopped calling. Rebecca's parents canceled their support. There were whispers of debts, arguments about apartments and cars they couldn't afford. Eventually, I heard they had moved into a small rental across town, a far cry from the grand estate they had dreamed of. He tried to call me again. Once, twice. Each time the phone lit up, I let it ring. One evening, he left a message. His voice was tired, no longer angry. "Dad, I just wanted to say, I miss you." I didn't delete it, but I didn't call back either. I told myself this truth. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. Boundaries don't mean bitterness. They mean survival. I had survived his betrayal, and I wasn't about to open the door again. Some nights I still spoke to Margaret. I sat with her picture on the table, the one of us in front of this very house 30 years ago. I whispered, "We gave him everything. He chose to throw it away, but I chose to keep us alive, even in memory." Her smile in the photo never faded. It kept me strong. And there, in that small apartment, I discovered something new. Freedom. Freedom from fear, from manipulation, from being seen as a bank account instead of a man. I joined a community group that organized food drives. I donated time, not just money. I told my story to a few close friends, and they nodded with understanding. Many had faced betrayals of their own, though smaller, quieter. Betrayal doesn't need millions to hurt. It only needs someone you trusted to turn their back. I began to paint again, something I hadn't done since college. My hands, once calloused from work, found peace in holding brushes instead of tools. My small apartment walls soon filled with landscapes, memories of places Margaret and I had once visited. Grand Canyon sunsets, New England autumns, the blue shimmer of Lake Tahoe. For the first time in decades, I wasn't painting for anyone else's approval. I was painting because I wanted to see the colors on canvas. The contrast between me and my son could not have been clearer. I had lost him but gained myself. He had lost my money, and in chasing it, had lost his foundation. The distance between us was no longer a wound, but a boundary that kept me alive. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with a glass of red wine, the park lights glowing below, I whispered out loud, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself." The words felt final, solid, like the closing of a book. The lesson was carved into me now. Family is not the ones who share your blood if they treat you as expendable. Family is those who honor you, respect you, and see you as more than a checkbook. The truth always wins, even if it costs you the people you once loved most. Self-respect is the last fortune a man can protect, and it is the only one that matters when all else is stripped away. So I live simply, quietly, and free. I walk in the mornings. I paint in the afternoons. I attend community meetings in the evenings. And sometimes, when the world grows still, I hear Margaret's voice in my heart, proud and gentle. I know she sees me. In the back of my mind, there is a thought about what comes next. Perhaps joining an international charity, maybe even traveling again. Switzerland calls to me with its lakes and mountains, a place where a man can live with dignity, sip wine by the water, and know he has done what was right. The story with Michael is over. The story with myself has just begun. The apartment in Montreux was modest, nothing like the grand house I had given away, yet every morning when I pulled open the curtains and saw the lake shimmer under the Swiss sun, I felt rich in a way no dollar amount could measure. I had bought the place for $220,000, a fraction of what I once owned, but it felt entirely mine. No whispers of betrayal echoed in these rooms. The balcony looked over the water, the mountains standing like sentinels beyond, and in the evenings the sound of church bells drifted across. Peace had a sound, I realized, and it was this. My days took on a rhythm I hadn't known since Margaret was alive. I joined a small community group that met twice a week, helping underprivileged students with scholarships and housing. The first check from my fund had already been distributed. Watching those young faces light up reminded me of when I had first sent Michael off to college, proud and hopeful. The difference was that these young people carried gratitude like a torch. They looked me in the eye and said thank you, as though the word itself mattered. It did. Gratitude is heavier than gold, yet light to carry. One afternoon I received a letter. The envelope was thin, written in careful, uneven handwriting. Inside was a note from a student named Daniel. "Mr. Patterson," it read, "your scholarship saved me. I was ready to quit school and work at the factory, but now I can continue my studies. You didn't just give me money, you gave me a future, you saved my life." I sat at the small table in my kitchen, reading the words over and over. Tears blurred the ink until I could barely see. I whispered into the silence, "Margaret, we finally did it right. We saved someone who needed it." That single letter outweighed every cruel word Michael had thrown at me. Michael, meanwhile, had drifted far from the life he thought he was building. After the scandal of the wedding, Rebecca's family turned their backs. Within months, the marriage unraveled. She left him, taking what little reputation he had left. I heard, through an old neighbor back in the States, that he now rented a cramped apartment above a hardware store, working long shifts just to pay the bills. He had tried to call me once more, but by then I no longer answered. The boundaries were firm. He had lost the right to cross them. His life was his consequence, not my burden. I often thought about the lessons etched into my bones. For parents like me, the truth was simple, yet brutal. Never give so much of yourself that you disappear. Sacrifice should build bridges, not chains. We love our children, but love without boundaries can turn into a weapon used against us. For children, I hope the message was clear. Do not treat your parents as banks or stepping stones. Gratitude is the foundation of family. Without it, the word family is nothing but letters on paper. And about the world we live in, money has a way of distorting human nature. It twists ambition into greed, love into leverage, respect into entitlement. But money is never the enemy. The enemy is forgetting who you are while chasing it. Sometimes I walked along the lake shore, listening to the gulls, watching the old couples holding hands on benches. I felt lighter than I had in decades. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the water gold, I said it out loud to myself. I don't need Michael's apology. I don't need his approval. I have my own life, and I have peace. The words felt like a seal on the journey I had traveled, a final stamp of independence. The past did not vanish, of course. The scars remained. There were moments, late at night, when I stared at Margaret's picture and wondered if I could have raised Michael differently, with firmer boundaries, with less indulgence. But then I remembered the way he looked at me through the gate, begging, already broken. Choices had been his, and choices have consequences. As weeks turned into months, I found joy in small rituals. I painted again, just as I once promised myself. I filled the apartment walls with color, sunset landscapes, portraits of mountains, even a painting of my old house, not as a monument of pain, but as a reminder of endurance. On Sundays, I joined neighbors for long walks, and in the evenings, I read novels by the window. Freedom had texture, it had rhythm, it had a weight that was both grounding and uplifting. I never responded to Michael's last letter. He had written that he was sorry, that he had been foolish, that he was learning the hard way. I placed the letter in a drawer, unread a second time. I didn't need to tear it up. I didn't need to answer. The silence was answer enough. Some ties are meant to be cut, not mended. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always require reunion. Sometimes forgiveness is letting go completely, freeing both sides to live with the truth. One morning, Daniel, the scholarship student, sent me another note. He had passed his exams. He enclosed a photograph of himself in front of the university library, smiling, books in hand. I pinned the picture to my refrigerator. Every time I opened it, I saw proof that goodness can outlive betrayal. I have found my place. Not in wealth, not in grand homes, not in hollow celebrations. My place is here, by the lake, with a life lived in truth. I lift my eyes to the sky sometimes and whisper, character is the only fortune no one can ever steal. And that thought carries me through the quiet nights. I don't wait for Michael anymore. I don't wait for his wife or for apologies or for redemption that may never come. My story is finished with them. My story now is with myself, with Margaret in memory, with strangers who become family through kindness, and with every young person whose life is touched by the fund. Every evening, as the bells ring and the lake turns silver under the moon, I breathe in the cool air and think, I am seen, I am worthy, I am free. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.